Okay, take a moment. Think about who you are. Right beneath the surface, there's this hidden universe, this 3-pound organ made of the most complex stuff we've ever found. And today, we're going to take a tour of that secret world inside your head.
But that brings up a pretty massive question, doesn't it? As you're going about your day, making choices, feeling things, thinking all your thoughts, who's actually in charge? Who's the one pulling the levers?
Because get this, a whole century of neuroscience is pointing to a really startling conclusion. Your conscious mind, the part that you think of as you, might just be a tiny passenger, basically along for the ride. So if your conscious self isn't really calling all the shots, then who are you? I mean, really. Let's start by digging into just how much of a stranger you can be to yourself.
This isn't just a cool line from a Pink Floyd song. It's a deep, deep truth about how we exist. The incredibly sophisticated machinery that's cooking up our thoughts and actions is totally alien to our conscious experience. And yet, somehow, that's us.
There's this wild story from the 1940s. An explorer, Arthur Alberts, plays back a recording for a West African native of his own voice. And the man literally accuses Alberts of stealing his tongue. To him, it felt like magic, because a voice seems like it's, well, not a physical thing. And we kind of do the same thing with our own thoughts, don't we? We treat them like they're just magic, with no real substance.
But they are not magic. Here's the crucial part. Thoughts are a physical process. And we know this because if you change the physical brain, you change the thoughts. A simple cup of coffee, a bad night's sleep, a serious injury, all of it changes the very landscape of what you are capable of thinking.
Okay, so if our thoughts are a physical process, what kind of machine is actually running it all? Honestly, the scale of it is almost impossible to wrap your head around, but let's give it a shot. It all starts with just 3 pounds of stuff. It doesn't sound like much, right? But packed inside that little space is without a doubt the most complex system in the known universe. That system is built from about 100 billion brain cells, or neurons, and each one of those cells, on its own, is as complex as an entire city, constantly trafficking billions of molecules every single moment. Every second, right now, as you're listening to me, those cells are firing off trillions of electrical pulses to each other. If you could somehow see all that activity as light, the brightness would be absolutely blinding. And all of this, it's happening completely outside of your awareness. Now, here's a really useful way to think about it. Imagine your consciousness is the CEO of a giant, sprawling company. You, the CEO, you set the general goals, but you have almost no access to the day-to-day operations. You're basically the last to hear the news. The big deals have already been made, deep down in the unconscious part of the company. And this just nails it, doesn't it? You know that aha moment, that stroke of genius where you jump up and say, "I've got it." Well, that isn't you thinking of it in that instant. No, that's the final, polished product being delivered up to the corner office after weeks, maybe even years of silent work by all the employees on the floors below.
But the story gets even stranger. It turns out the brain isn't one big unified company. It's more like a noisy parliament, jam-packed with competing political parties, and they're all fighting for control.
We've all been here. Someone offers you a big slice of chocolate cake. One system in your brain, this ancient emotional part, just screams, "Yes, cake, I need it now." But another, more modern rational system calmly steps in and says, "Hang on a second, what about our long-term health goals?" What you end up doing is just a result of which party won that internal vote. And this internal battle, it's not just about cake. It's about who we fundamentally are. Which brings us to a pretty infamous real-world example, the actor Mel Gibson. So when he was drunk, he said these horrible, despicable things that the sober, genuinely apologetic Mel Gibson insisted he didn't believe. So the question is, which one was the real him? The neuroscientific take on this is, well, they both were. The brain isn't a single self. It contains rival teams. And just recognizing you have these different yous inside is the first step to figuring out those internal debates. And this is where we get into the really challenging stuff. If our biology can bring out these totally different versions of ourselves, how much are we actually in the driver's seat? I mean, look at this unbelievable medical case. There's a drug given to Parkinson's patients to help regulate the chemical dopamine. But for some of them, it had this bizarre side effect. It turned them into compulsive gamblers.
We're talking about people who had never gambled before in their lives. And then when the doctors lowered the dose, the urge, it just vanished. The desire wasn't a choice. It was a direct result of their brain chemistry.
Or take this, and this is a difficult but really important point to consider. Research found a correlation where people who carry a specific set of genes are 44 times more likely to commit violent crimes, including sexual assault, than people who don't. 44 times. Now that doesn't mean biology is destiny, not at all, but it does suggest a staggering biological predisposition that we just can't afford to ignore.
And what is that specific gene set? It's found on the Y chromosome. In other words, we are talking about the biological difference between males and females. Now let's be crystal clear here. This does not excuse or justify any harmful behavior, period. What it does is force us to face a very difficult reality, that our biology, which we don't choose, can deal us a very different hand of cards, creating predispositions that society has to understand if we ever hope to address them.
Okay, I know this can all feel a bit unsettling, right? Like we're being kicked off the throne in the center of our own lives. But what if that's actually a good thing?
You know, this isn't the first time science has challenged our sense of self-importance. Galileo showed us we weren't the center of the universe. Darwin showed we were just another branch on the animal tree of life. And now, neuroscience is delivering the latest dethronement. We aren't even the center of our own minds.
But here's the beautiful part. Each one of those previous dethronements opened up a much richer, more wondrous, and frankly, more accurate view of reality. And this one is no different. You are not less than you thought you were. You are infinitely more complex, more mysterious, and more magnificent than your conscious mind could ever comprehend.
So we're left with this ancient command, know thyself, but seen through a completely new lens. If the self we're aware of is just the tiny tip of the iceberg, then the journey to truly know who we are, well, it's really just beginning. Makes you wonder, what other secrets are waiting down there in the deep?